for my final question this afternoon, this is to you, Ms. Lee. Your testimony states that a website waits to be visited while a voice travels. Can you expand upon that and describe how that principle could be applied to House.gov, the House.gov website? In other words, what would giving the House.gov website a voice actually look like?
I think we've extensively covered the notion of generative AI being the main search engine, but looks like the fact is that Pew tracked 69,000 Google searches, and then when the summary appeared, people went to a website 8% of the time versus 15% without one. So I think away from that, I think that we can turn content into conversation based on where it is happening. So actually the simplest thing I can say is that when you post on Reddit or in Facebook, you can respond like right away. Like you can activate things and invest in things that have that dialogue. When they say this is happening, you can actually appear and be dynamic in social media platforms or Discord, or like create APIs or encourage the development of APIs that constantly like are embedded in the way that constituents really talk about things. Like I can always appreciate the role of Congress.gov and House.gov like as a website, but I feel that there is a digital voice that is lacking. So I think the United Kingdom just set up a communications office to be that voice. I don't think we have one that are similar, that are responsible for, I guess, outbound communication, right? Everything is very reactionary, like we said, like somebody has to ask for it for us to give it to them, just like on the website, right? I have to ask for it. I can't discover anything, right? So I think that when I say voice, I loosely mean that the information has to be encouraged and actively participating in dialogue where it is happening. I also think that the reason that you might be getting more visits when you have AI answer your questions is actually because it prefers structured websites. So government websites are well established enough that it can actually be the #1 search result, but we haven't intentionally done it. And I think that the change of the way that people are engaging online has never been regarded for a digital democracy like conversation, right? Like where are people? And I actually can remember one of the strains that I learned at Ledge Council was this, and this is actually the root of the question and perhaps the thesis itself, is that when I was working with Ledge Council, I was working with Wade at the time, and he said that they're in an existential debate and concern all the time, negotiating the difference between theory and practice of something, meaning that bills are now being used. So bills were written to be permanent. Every member or staffer who submits a bill assumes it could be permanent. So Ledge Council takes that very seriously from what I have learned, right? And so they have to be very accurate because it could become permanent. And when that happens, and members, but in that level of scrutiny, right? Like the organization is like, we're taking this very, very seriously, but really the intent of that bill was to have dialogue because they needed to go on a news channel and say, I did this thing, or be able to point to that thing. I think that what I'm saying is when we lose public forum, like there's not people like outside on a soapbox anymore, right? We've lost that actual public forum.
I think if you checked my social media, there'd be a lot of people that are on their soapbox, but that may be a different conversation.
The digital soapbox, right? So this, absolutely, I think that that is what I mean. I mean that we have lost this ability to have any kind of conversation, and the House hasn't acknowledged at all the communication portion of dialogue.
Would you agree, though, that part of this is being able to have a dialogue in a respectful and thoughtful manner? Because I think people have asked me before, how could you get more bipartisanship? How could you get more dialogue? And I said, my response to them is turn the internet off. And although that's not a reality, and nor does that solve the issue, I think making sure that we recognize that we need dialogue. We need to be able to talk through these issues and come to some sort of agreement that, we may not agree on the issue, we may disagree vehemently, but we can move forward in a different direction. And I think that's the hard part about the online conversation is, in some cases, it is obfuscated because the person doesn't want to be publicly known. They use fake usernames or pictures. They're not really wanting to have a dialogue. They're sort of wanting to have an argument rather than being able to sit down and hash out real issues.
I feel like we could actually sit over a glass of wine and really actually think about the notion of dialogue in democracy at length.
I think Ms. Torres and I are for your deal.
But actually, dialogue, one thing I will say is dialogue isn't always a conversation. It is sometimes a confirmation or an acknowledgement. It doesn't have to be like back and forth, right? But right now, we're not actually even doing the bare minimum of acknowledging or place wayfinding. So, I mean, before we can get into a conversation or two-way, as we say, let's think about the one-to-many that we can fix now.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Lee, for that. And